Thank you very much. Joined now by Alec Lewis. Alec is a beat writer for the Vikings for The Athletic, also hosts the Alec Lewis Show, his podcast. Listen to it, also read his work, does tremendous job. One of the best beat writers in the entire country. Al, great to have you.
Will, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for having me. It's nice to be in here in the warmth, given how cold it's been outside for an Alabama kid that I am. So thanks for having me, Will.
Amen, amen. And the sun is shining. How about that? 1 week removed since the Vikings let go of GM Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. Your opinion, big picture, we'll start with this. What are some of the biggest factors you feel like the Vikings took into play when making this decision?
Yeah, and I think you said it really well there. There were a lot of factors that contributed to ownership's eventual decision to move on from Kwesi Adofo-Mensah after 4 seasons. There was the lack of draft success over the span of the last 4 years. There was the quarterback decision-making from the spring of 2025 that obviously played a role in the majorly disappointing season that was 2025. There were internal dynamics that were challenging behind the scenes and probably going to be very difficult to work through. And then there's just the fact that he was hired as a non-traditional candidate, someone who did not have your traditional scouting background, evaluator chops, and in an industry and in a league that is very, I would say, old school. It is an uphill battle to establish trust when you are that type of candidate. So it wasn't a decision that was entirely blindsiding other than the timing multiple weeks after the season ended.
Kind of piggybacking off that, the timing was a little unique in that it was a couple of weeks removed from when we last heard from Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. Met with the media like he always does following the season. I think the date was January 13th. Couple weeks go by, feels like he's going to stay. Heck, last week he was scouting at the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama, back in your neck of the woods. What'd you make of the timing of this decision?
Yeah, that was just I think the shock from a lot of people in the industry, in the building, outside the building, and definitely for me. I mean, I was on the phone with a source for like an hour Friday morning, got off the phone and then found this out, and my phone was overheating from texts and calls, I think because of the surprise. And I mean, a day earlier, he was in Mobile at the Senior Bowl meeting with an agent about a current Vikings player's contract. So it was definitely, it came as a surprise in the sense that you usually expect these types of things to happen right after a season that the ownership group knew was going to be disappointing. So definitely was the component of it that was most interesting to people. And from what I've gathered, it was just the ownership wanting to be methodical in making the correct decision and not rushing to judgment the way that some do in those ownership positions throughout the league.
Diving a little deeper into the factors in the Vikings making this decision, let's start with the draft success or maybe lack thereof under Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. You look at it, I think I counted he drafted 28 players. Out of that 28, 14 are currently on the roster. You go back to his first year, 2022, 10-player class, just 2 remaining on the roster. Your thoughts on how much of an impact the draft lack of success played in this decision?
Yeah, it was huge. I mean, in the NFL, you can only sustain winning through free agency for so long. And to Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and the staff's credit, they did that specifically ahead of the 2024 season. But when you start and your first draft is 2022 and it played out the way they did, where they traded back within the division and did not probably generate enough return in that trade, and then selected a safety when you could have selected Kyle Hamilton, and the rest of that draft class did not pay dividends besides a player like Jalen Nailor, it was always going to be very difficult to overcome and to probably recapture a level of trust among everybody. So it was that. They have had hits, whether you're talking Jordan Addison, even Donovan Jackson this past season, but the entirety of his draft record would tell you that they needed to hit more with some of the late round picks and develop those players, because drafting is one component of it, and then you have to develop players, and that falls on more than just Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, which is partly why Mark Wilf, the Vikings co-owner, said we all share the accountability here.
Looking at the quarterback position, obviously that played a big factor in this decision. The optics of Sam Darnold getting ready to play in the Super Bowl when he played with the Vikings just 1 year ago had the potential to bring Sam back. Obviously, hindsight is 2020. You look at Daniel Jones. He signs with Indiana this offseason. They were hoping to bring him back. J.J. McCarthy's season and the ups and downs and the struggles. How much of an impact did the quarterback position play in this role, in this decision?
It was huge. I mean, just like the drafts, it weighed massively in the context of the decision that Vikings ownership made to move on from Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. And it is really complex and difficult in my role to go back to that time, the spring of 2025, and try to litigate out, whose role played the most in Sam Darnold not being back here and Daniel Jones not being back here and not being able to, find a path for Joe Flacco or not bringing in Aaron Rodgers. I mean, you can probably revisionist history all of that. What is pretty clear now, speaking obviously with hindsight, is the Vikings needed a better plan and a better execution of the plan to have more insurance behind a guy in J.J. McCarthy who was still so young and still needed so much time to develop. And so, in the overall calculus and accounting of why this decision was made, it was a massive part of it.
One of your things that you brought up in your article this week that I found interesting, even this week, I'm quoting here, one team source brought up the subject again regarding Aaron Rodgers, saying, quote, "I would still like to know who made that final decision not to sign Rodgers. I still don't know. What I do know is it affected a lot of livelihoods," end quote. First off, great reporting there, but also when you heard that quote, what was going through your mind?
Well, I mean, frankly, this was something that was said this past week. It's something I've heard many times over, and I think the response from some people is like, well, man, this must be this is a person who you would very much expect to have a very clear understanding of how that decision to not sign Aaron Rodgers would have been made and who would have been the primary probably leader within that decision-making apparatus. And that to me is reflective of and revealing of the lack of probably, I don't want to say synergy, but the lack of consensus in terms of why some of these decisions were made and who was making them and how they eventually came to be. And so, I thought that was a very telling quote. It wasn't the first time anybody said something like that. And it's not, I will say this, the lack of understanding of who sometimes implemented or made the final call of these decisions was not something confined to just Aaron Rodgers. This is something and a conversation that has gone back years, which is, it is an example of some of the dynamics internally.
So moving forward at that general manager spot, the Vikings giving the opportunity to Rob Brzezinski, someone who's widely respected, not only in Eagan, but league-wide, agents, players, you name it. He's been in Eagan for, I believe, 27 seasons. He's seen it all, worked with everyone. What do you make of this opportunity for Rob moving forward of running the front office through at least the draft?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be challenging. There is no question about it, in the sense that you're now in charge of all these meetings. Typically, Rob Brzezinski, who, to your point, has been with the team since 1999 when Red McCombs was the owner.
How about that?
I mean, this guy has an understanding has more institutional knowledge probably of this place, of how fans feel, of what fans want, of what he's going to have to navigate with ownership and with the coaching staff that is currently in place. Probably has a better grasp on that than anybody internally. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how he tries to segment out responsibility. He has been the point person with agents and contract negotiations for decades now. So I still expect him to play a big role with that. I also think Emily Battis, who has been on the staff, will contribute to that side of things. They also brought in an experienced cap expert in Matt Thomas, who's been around for a long time, to help. And then for me, I fully expect Rob Brzezinski to rely heavily on Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores as his primary evaluators for the draft and free agency. And so it's going to be fascinating to see how that influence plays out in terms of what decisions are ultimately made.
Kind of piggybacking off what you just said there, Kevin O'Connell, Brian Flores, how much power does that duo have moving forward and everything?
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt. And
Yep.
and when Kevin O'Connell was extended like he was last offseason, that was a declaration of how much influence he should have. And then for Brian Flores to recently sign his massive extension, that is also a snapshot at the conviction from ownership in the potential that Brian Flores can make optimal decisions. So the accountability in many ways now falls on Kevin O'Connell, Brian Flores, and obviously Rob Brzezinski, who will be shepherding the entire staff. And I think the goal internally moving forward here will be to come together and ensure that there is faith and confidence and belief in every decision that is made. And if they can get to that place over the next few months, I think that will set up the Vikings for a future that is going to hinge largely on what happens these next few months, because there are big decisions to make.
Just a few more for you, and one of those big decisions, obviously the quarterback position. Curious your thoughts on where the Vikings move forward at that position. Your article today threw out a guy like Kyler Murray, a veteran free agent. You could double down, go back to J.J. McCarthy, a different outsider, Jimmy Garoppolo, Aaron Rodgers potentially, Mac Jones I've seen out there. What are your thoughts on what the team might do moving forward at the QB spot?
Yeah, I would be fascinated with the folks watching the camera right now think of the names that obviously that I've thrown out there that you just lobbed up, because it's hard to find the type of candidate that threads the needle where the folks sitting on their couch across the great state of Minnesota listen to that name and get fired up about it, whether it is Kyler Murray, Mac Jones, Geno Smith, Jimmy Garoppolo, bringing back Kirk Cousins. I mean, it is hard to find one of those guys that makes people very optimistic. What I would say is you can't rule out the idea that J.J. McCarthy, who is as motivated as ever, you can't rule out the fact that he has an exceptional offseason and comes in with a lot to prove and pushes to continue the progress that he started to show throughout the back half of the season. But the Vikings obviously and absolutely need a level of insurance given JJ's inability to stay healthy last season and just his youth. They need a level of insurance that is going to allow them to win games consistently, whether that ends up being a guy like Mac Jones or Kyler Murray. So that, I expect, will fall on Kevin O'Connell's desk more than anything else, and where he wants to take it is going to be revelatory of what he values and where he feels J.J. McCarthy is at.
Two more for you. Moving forward, Kevin O'Connell heading into year 5 as the Vikings head coach, still seeking his first playoff win. You hear that. Your mind, how much pressure is Kevin O'Connell under moving forward?
Yeah, I think there's pressure, but there's always pressure in the NFL. Like I think anytime anybody across the league or anybody in my role analyzing the league believes that someone has this long runway to try to build towards a winner, it's really difficult. I mean, you look at what Mike Vrabel has done with the New England Patriots. He gets hired in his first year, and now he's in the Super Bowl, and that, heightens and amplifies the expectations from owners in other buildings. So what I would say is I would be surprised if the Vikings don't try to do everything they can in Kevin O'Connell's 5th season to try to make the playoffs and push deeper than they've gotten in recent years in the playoffs. And so that does come with pressure, but that's why you get paid more than $10 million a year to make these decisions. That's why I sit here in this comfortable chair in a sport coat, and I don't have to deal with all of the dynamics at play.
Amen, dude. It feels good when you say that. Get you out of here on this. One of the things that kind of went under the radar is the staff additions. Frank Smith arrives from Miami, offensive coordinator down there, Mike McDaniel. Comes with a nice reputation, especially when it comes to ground success and run game success. Curious your thoughts on that addition to the staff.
Yeah, they made a handful of them essentially over the last week that did definitely, it was not probably on the A topic of stories or shows or podcasts, but Frank Smith was the OC in Miami and a right-hand guy with Mike McDaniel, who had arguably the most creative run game in the NFL. So his ideas, his communication with Kevin O'Connell, I think that's going to be huge. Defensively, they made 2 important hires too. Ryan Nielsen, who will be the defensive run game coordinator, and Gerald Alexander, who will be the defensive pass game coordinator. Both of those guys are widely respected throughout the league. They both either have been defensive coordinators or have defensive coordinator potential. So, I mean, I'm looking forward to the time at which I'm out there for OTAs just watching these guys coach and watching ball because, I don't know, it's what makes you feel like a kid, probably just loving it the way that made you want to get into it in the first place. So looking forward to seeing how things kind of shake out.
Amen. Amen. Al, this is fun. Thanks so much, my man.
Always will. Appreciate it. Thank you guys. And stay warm.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell our viewers real quick where we can read and hear your work.
Yeah, theathletic.com, where we have a staff that pushes me every single day in Michael Russo, John Krasinski, and our whole stable of writers. And then I do host a podcast because I am a human, and we all have to, apparently, under my name, The Alec Lewis Show. So, yeah, it's been a grind of a year, and hopefully the offseason gives some reprieve. Yeah. But whatever I have to do to be accountable to the people here who care as much about these teams, I'm going to do on a daily basis.
As he always does. Al, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Will. Appreciate it, man.